In this week's Gospel, Jesus presents to us his greatest commandment. Now, this reading happens in the context of this series of readings throughout the Gospels where the Pharisees and the Sadducees are trying to trick Jesus. They keep asking him questions, and they're trying to make it sound like they just want to know the information, but they're actually trying to get him to say something wrong so they can prosecute him, right? Either in their own court of law or even more preferably in the Roman court of law so they can get rid of him. All right, and that's what's ultimately going to happen on Good Friday. All right, so this series of questioning now, they're asking him, what is the most important law in the Old Testament? At the time of Jesus, rabbis would count 613 laws in the entire Old Testament. And there was massive debate amongst them about which one was the most important one. So they are asking Jesus to wade into treacherous waters here, right? Which one is the most important one? Go ahead and say an answer, because you're going to alienate part of this crowd no matter what you say. And so Jesus' response is this twofold law of love, which, by the way, doesn't get him in hot water with anybody. People think he's brilliant for this response. He says, the first commandment, the most important commandment is love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? This comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6, which in context is interesting. It's God's command to parents, right? He's telling parents, act as if I am the most important thing in your life, and that's how you will pass on this faith to your kid. That's how you'll be happy, all right? And we know that because immediately after in Deuteronomy 6, when God says the most important commandment is you should love the Lord your God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. He says, drill this into your children. Teach it to them whether you're at home or abroad, whether you're busy or at rest. So Jesus is quoting God's commandment to us as parents to show our kids that God is the most important things in our lives, most important thing in our lives, right? And then Jesus goes a step further because they only asked him for the most important commandment. He says, I won't give you one, I'll give you two. The second one is love your neighbor as yourself. He's quoting from Leviticus. And then he says the entire law and the prophets, everything in the Bible, is summarized by these two things. If we authentically love God as the most important thing in our lives, most important person in our lives, and if we authentically love our neighbors as ourselves, we'll keep every one of those 613 commandments and then some. Right? Notice with the second commandment, he doesn't say love your neighbor more than yourself, or love your neighbor better than yourself, right? It presupposes you need to actually authentically take care of your own good as well and love your neighbor in that way, all right? And so the question for us as families as we ponder this gospel this week is, what are the concrete things we do that show that God is the most important thing in our lives? Especially on Sundays, the Lord's Day, when he commands us to come together, what do we do that shows that God is the most important thing in our lives? And every day of the week. What do we do that shows God is number one in our lives? And what are the concrete ways that we love our neighbor as ourselves? The people who live next door to us and anybody we run into. How do we actually live out these commandments that Jesus gives us? Because he says they are the most important in the entire Bible.